back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I am here today to do one of my most exciting videos that I love doing every year, and that is the top books that I read in 2020. Now, actually, Steve has decided he's going to do his own version of this, so if you haven't seen his video, I will link it down below. But I wanted to do my video as well and just give you a little update on how my reading year went in 2020. It was a tough year for all of us, I think we'll all agree on that. So I wasn't expecting great things in terms of completing my reading challenge or just having read what I wanted. I, every year, have been involved in BookTube SFF and involved in SPFBO, so I end up reading a lot of the titles for those competitions and not always all the stuff off my shelves as much as I would like. So I was unsure kind of whether 2020 would affect that quite a lot. But I think I had a good reading year and I'm pretty pleased with myself despite having a few months where I'd read a lot less than usual or times where I just wasn't in the mood as much. I still think I read a lot of books. So I actually have a reading challenge every year of around 100 books. I've changed it a little bit for 2021, but I'll talk about that in another video. So my challenge for 2020 was 100 books, and I've managed that every year, or a lot more than that every year, for the past 5-6 years, something like that. So I did manage it again. I got 113 books read, which I'm really pleased with, especially considering the year as a whole. I actually read over 41,600 pages in the year, which I think is pretty good going, especially considering lockdowns and just mental health like drain on your sanity, which 2020 was quite that. So with that being said, it's hard for me to always go through my very tops because I read so many that I loved, and quite a few of the ones that I really rated highly were actually rereads as well, so I don't want to go into too much detail on them because I've already reviewed them, I've already talked about them. So mainly I'm going to focus on the newer books that I read, which I really enjoyed. Let's just dive straight in, shall we? So first up, the longest book that I actually read in the whole of 2020 is this one over here, which you can just about see. It's called The Braided Path by Chris Wooding, and it's actually 3 books in one, which is why it's the longest book. It was just under 1,000 pages, 992, so a pretty chunky one. And I'm pretty proud of myself for reading that because it's been on my shelf for ages and I've intended to read it so many times and I finally got to it in 2020. So I'm pretty pleased that that was the longest that I got to. My average book length was just under 400 pages. I tend to read one big long one and then a couple of short ones and then a big long one again. So it really varies, but according to Goodreads, that's what my average length was this year. My average rating, which I think has been the same for like the last 3 years, was 3.5 out of 5, which I'm fairly consistently giving out 3s, 3.5s, 4s. 5s are a lot harder to get from me now, and I think 2 and 1 I tend to only give out if I really wasn't a big fan. So yeah, 3.5 sounds about right for the majority of the reads that I had in the year. So I'm just going to go through and highlight a couple of the books that I really enjoyed in 2020. First up was a reread for me, and that was Mallory Blackman's Noughts and Crosses, which is still my favourite one in the series. I reread it. I also started watching the TV show, which I highly recommend, and I just generally love it and think it's such an important book to read whilst you're in school, but also just to read generally, whether you've read it before or not. It's about race relations, and it's also a very kind of dystopian look at the world, and I really enjoy the kind of flip on its head of the racism in that book. So I really like that, and I really recommend it, and I gave it 5 stars for the second time rereading it. Another book which I really loved is a new one from Jodie Taylor. Jodie Taylor's fast become one of my all-time favourite authors, and this series is no exception to that. It's called Doing Time, and I really love this series. It's a continuation of the Chronicles of St. Mary's series, so it's set in the same world, but it follows slightly different characters, although there is a fair bit of overlap between the two storylines and the characters in both of them. I love it. I think it's a lot of fun. I can't go into too many details on this one because obviously I don't think you should read it without having read the Chronicles of St. Mary's, because those are just excellent as well. But you can start here, it just will spoil you for the St. Mary's books. So I would recommend reading the Chronicles of St. Mary's followed by this. but you can start here if you just want to dive in straight away to this one. The next one I read was a self-published, and this one got 5 stars from me. I really enjoyed it. It's the second one in a series by Ian Gregoire called The Apprentice in the Master's Shadow. This is a pretty dark series, definitely doesn't stray away from kind of going into exploring dark places with our main characters, and just generally being very magic filled as well. I read the first one, I think maybe a year or 2 ago, for one of the rounds of SBFBO. I really enjoyed that one, but I found myself completely falling in love with the second one in the series, and I really recommend the series as a whole. I just think it's great, and it definitely earned its spot as like one of my top of the year. Even though I read it quite a long time ago, I still think it's a lot of fun, and I just recommend the whole series, so I'll try and find my review and link it for the first one if you're interested. TJ Klune had to make an appearance on this list because 2020 was definitely the year that I read a lot of TJ Klune books. So yeah, just highly recommend anything by TJ, to be honest. But some of the books that I've most enjoyed are his very rompy, sexy, erotica style ones, one of which is A Destiny of Dragons, which are called Tales from Verenia. This series, I think, has 4 or 5 books out at the moment. I've read 3 of them, and I'm currently about to start the 4th one. I love these. Steve and I have been listening to them together, which is why we've been taking them really slow, but we honestly love this series. It makes us laugh so much. It is so steamy, so rompy, so over the top, and very LGBT on all the characters, but my god, it's a laugh and it's a lot of fun. So I think if you're over the age of 18, let's say, I would recommend these. I would not recommend them if you're lower than that, because they are definitely not, you know, PG friendly. Let's put it that way. They are pretty sexy. I also read a couple of non-fictions in this year, especially those to do with race. I've read quite a few good ones actually, and I think I did a video about quite a few of them, but one of my favourites, which still remains my favourite, is Black and British. This one was obviously very much about Britain and the slave trade particularly, and how it got started, and also kind of throughout the ages, what happened with it, what changed, how things eventually came to a stop as well, but also what kind of landscape that whole trade industry has left on Britain. So I really, really recommend this. I gave it 5 stars. I think, honestly, it was such an enlightening read, especially if you are from Britain and you want to know more about your history and your culture and where things came from, because much as we all like to think our countries are good, obviously every country has quite a sordid history when you start looking into it, and Britain is no exception at all. Probably one of the worst as well for various things, but the slave trade is essentially down to a lot of Britain being a problem. So yeah, really recommend looking into this, finding out more for yourself about what the history really is. I never got taught any of this stuff in school. I got very small glimpses of some of it, and that is all. So I really recommend kind of doing a bit of your own research into history, and especially into race relations history in your country. And this book, if you're British, is fantastic. Even if you're not British, I think it's fantastic, but particularly if you are, it obviously will resonate with you a little bit more. So I really recommend that one as well. Another TJ Klune book, I did say TJ was going to make it on the list. This one's probably my favourite TJ Klune book, and it's one that I find very easy to recommend to everyone because it is not sexy in any way, but it is very much lovely and heartwarming and beautiful. Steve's mum's just read it and she loved it, and I'm trying to make Steve read it fairly soon. Quite a few of my friends have read it and really enjoyed it as well. I'm trying to get people in book club to read it soon because I love it and want to reread it. So yeah, I really recommend this. It's really heartwarming. It's about a guy who just doesn't quite, you know, he doesn't really have a purpose in his life as much as he should, and he goes to this school as a kind of assessment to see whether they need to be shut down or not. And when he gets there, everyone is wild and different and very unique and very kind of not what he's used to, and challenges all his ideals and all his stereotypes and makes him think outside the box, and it's just all about accepting otherness and being kind and being graceful and loving, and it's so beautiful. It's such a good story, and I honestly think the world would be a better place if everyone read this, so I highly recommend this one as well. One other book that I absolutely loved was The Wolf in the Whale. Again, this is one that I think I've done a full review for, so I'll link that. I loved this. It was so evocative and beautiful and completely different to every other fantasy I've read in terms of setting, in terms of pacing, in terms of just dealing with some really harsh subjects, as well as just being beautifully written and so immersive. It really took me into this icy world where the story is set, and we're following a very small kind of almost nomadic group as they traverse the ice plains, and it's so different to a lot of stuff I've read, so I really recommend that one as well. I just, yeah, loved it. Thought it was beautiful, thought it was heartbreaking and really emotional, and just, yeah, fiery book. I need to read some others by this author, I think, because that one hit me hard. And then the final one that I'm going to talk about as one of my favourites is The Lost War, which is in this year's SPFBO. It's in round 6 and it's doing fairly well overall. There's still quite a lot of scores to come in. This was not my pick for the year. It wasn't in my batch, but honestly it wasn't my favourite of all of the books now that I've read all the SPFBO ones for this year. I love this and I'm kind of rooting for it to win. So I have done a full review, so I'll link it below. I won't go into too much detail, but yeah, this was definitely my favourite of the year. 100% just thought it was fantastic. It had some cool twists that I didn't see coming, and it just slowly built up the story and the intensity and the world and the ideas, and I really need the second book. Yeah, it was so much fun and I really had a good time checking this one out, so I highly recommend that if you're interested in kind of self-published authors as well. This one's fantastic. Honestly, if you like Sword of Kaigen, I think you'd like this. They're very different, but they are equally matched on how well they're written and how fun they are, and just, yeah, the excitement. So I highly recommend this, along with all the other books that I've just mentioned, because like I say, there are so many good ones. I had plenty of other reads that I could have also kind of included, but this video could have gone on forever. So let's not go into too deep into my pile of 113, but those are some of the best ones that I really recommend. I'd love to know in the comments. I know I'm a little bit late doing this video, but I'd love to know, what did you enjoy the most out of the whole of 2020? And especially if it's SFF, then let me know whether it's something I need to read, because I feel like there's a lot that I need to read that came out in 2020, new releases, or just books that maybe you'd stumbled across in 2020. I'd love to have all of your opinions on the ones that I've read, and also just which ones stood out the most to you in your reading year. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.